come in. Never mind. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. So I'll call this meeting of the Sons of American Revolution McKinney chapter to order. Thank you for coming. I think we've got a really good turnout. I think I printed 31 of these agendas, and I think I've only got 1 or 2 left. So that's good. And how many people do we have online? 3 online. So that's pretty good. Okay, so let's start. We have some pledges and things we do in the agenda, by the way, for the visitors. So you just turn to the first page of the agenda. If you would, see, Don wasn't able to join us tonight, so I'll do the invocation. If you would rise, please, and join me in prayer. Let's fall back. Okay, you join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, on this occasion, send us your grace and understanding to conduct the business of our society. Send us the words of wisdom and point our paths of direction to fulfill our roles as guardians of our nation's heritage. Join with us as we endeavor to honor the dreams of our forefathers. In your Son's name, amen. Okay, let's see here. First up, we'll do our pledges. Nathan, could you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
Yes, please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Mark, could you lead us in the pledge to the Texas flag?
Yes, sir. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
And now the pledge to the SAR. If you could okay. Let's see. Boss, would you leave that? You need this. Here you go. I want that back.
We, descendants of the heroes of the American Revolution, who by their sacrifices established the United States of America, reaffirm our faith in principles of liberty and our
constitutional republic.
solemnly pledge ourselves to defend it.
Hey, you can get the last one.
I've got one over here.
I got one right here. Oh, no. Oh, you got one spare? Okay, so maybe only have 29. 30. Okay. Okay, so first up, Pete has an award. Oh, I'm sorry, please be seated. So Pete here, he's our sergeant at arms. Straight. And if you notice, because of his size, I usually listen to what he tells me.
Good evening, everyone. I am Pete McClellan, and I have the distinct pleasure and honor of introducing Ashton Higgins, who is the president of the Matthew Bolton CAR chapter. And we're excited because he was the winner of the Knight Essay Award for our chapter. And I wanted to give you a little feel for his background because it's quite extensive. Ashton Higgins is a senior at Green Hill School in Addison, Texas. His favorite classes include history and economics, and he maintains an above 4-point GPA on an unweighted 4.0 scale, which is pretty impressive. Outside of class, his favorite activities include debate, junior classical league, Latin club. I took Latin for 3 years and I never got past Latin 2. And the mock trial exam. Through each of these activities, he has had great success in different forms of tournaments and competitions. As a debater in the World Schools format, he has become a national champion at the 2021 National Debate Coaches Association National Championships, a Texas Forensics Association state at the 2020 state tournament, among winning over a dozen other contestants. Ashton has won multiple local, state, and national level awards across various disciplines, ranging from ancient geography to site necessitation of Latin passages. In his free time, Ashton enjoys gardening and reading about history, politics, and the environment. For college, Ashton plans to major in something combining philosophy, economics, and environmental studies. While he has not made a final college decision at this time, he's been offered admission to the University of Oxford in the United Kingdom to study geography. This interdisciplinary program combines economics, political science, environmental science, and development urban studies into a single program called geography. After undergraduate education, Ashton hopes to attend law school and hopefully become some kind of an attorney. Well, with that, I want to ask Ashton to come on up, and please welcome him. On behalf of the McKinney chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution, we want to give you this certificate, which proves that you are the George S. and still am Knight Essay Contest winner for the McKinney chapter. Congratulations. And with that, Ashton, we want to present you with this check for $100 as our winner. Thank you so much.
I hope check up here. Get what's really important. Okay. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you.
A very impressive young man.
Yes, he is. And they've got another appointment, so they're going to leave. Thank you so much, and we'll be seeing you again, I know that. Yes. Okay. Yep. Okay. Thanks, Pete. Yes, sir. Okay. So this is the fun part of the job, right? So Peter and Maria, would you come up? Let's see. I think we can probably get better back here. Can you see us better back here, Ross?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna do a little dance here. Excuse me. This is better than it was. Now, I want to, if everybody hadn't noticed, the absence of something here, except for over in this corner. So for all that hadn't been here in a while, usually they were having all their boxes because they had a lot of takeout, and the boxes were just coming. We had to open up a little hole here usually a lot of times because they had boxes over the screen too. So we're really excited about this. We're hoping this is a trend, and next time we come, there'll be no boxes here. So I think that's good. Well, anyway, so we got the honor today to induct a new member. Let me get my paperwork out here. These are my next door neighbors, by the way. So this is, go ahead, tell them who you are.
I'm Peter Ford.
Okay, and
Maria.
there you go. Okay.
We're Tom's next door neighbors.
Yeah, right. So I'm trying not to make them mad or anything here with this. So anyway, okay, so here it is. So Peter, if you raise your right hand. Okay. Compatriot Peter Bruce Ford, do you, as a descendant of one of the patriots and the heroes of the American Revolution, reaffirm your ancestors' faith in the principles of liberty and of our constitutional republic?
I do.
And will you pledge to support the National Society Sons of the American Revolution?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, with that, it's my honor to present you with this, with this certificate.
Great.
This is the fun part.
This is where the pain kicks in. So I hope you've been really nice to Maria for the last few days. You know, I'm just going to get that off. I'm going to give this to you. Let me read this first to you. Okay. This rosette is the official recognition emblem of the Sons of the American Revolution. Its blue and buff colors represent the colors of in the uniform worn by General George Washington. Wear it proudly. So with that, you can pin that on there. Don't forget that. You're gonna be real nice. You're not gonna, okay. Oh, no, okay. Okay. Okay, would everyone welcome compatriot Ford to the McKinney.
Tell them about the.
No, I haven't
I was
told
a
him.
Boy Scout.
I haven't told him about that. So compatriot Ford, we welcome you to the McKinney chapter, and we ask that you work with us to fulfill the purposes and objectives of the Sons of the American Revolution. At this time, would you like to say a few words, just whatever comes into your head or about your patriot?
I'll speak about my patriot.
Okay, we would love to have you.
Okay, my patriot is Robert Hitchborn. He was born in Boston in 1740.
Go ahead.
Okay, in Boston, Massachusetts. He was already a fourth generation American. His second great grandfather immigrated in 1650. He was a shipbuilder by trade and lived on Ann Street in Boston's North End. He was a cousin to Paul Revere, which is kind of cool. Actually, the Revere House, if you ever go to Boston, is right next door to the Hitchborn House. Okay. He was a member of the Sons of Liberty. And he was apparently a part of the tea ships, okay, which rumor has it, he was at the Boston Tea Party. He probably wouldn't admit to that. He was a first lieutenant in the Continental Army under Captain Jonathan Stoddard, which was under Colonel Henry Bromfield's Massachusetts militia. He retired to Stockton, Maine, and died in 1800.
Okay,
That's pretty much it.
okay. Congratulations. Well, get this. This is script, and then that's got your record copy and some other information about the society. Okay. Okay, I think next up, he's standing up and coming his way. So thank you.
Mark McCraw. Our speaker this evening is Carl Flowers. Carl has been entertaining and educating audiences for over 40 years. He was born and raised in Chicago. He attended and graduated at the University of Illinois, where he majored in speech and mass communications. He moved to Dallas in 1983 and was instrumental in helping found a company called Beauty Control Cosmetics and helping it grow to become one of the largest direct selling cosmetic companies in the United States. In 2004, he founded Liberty Seminars. He's conducted over 1,600 one-day seminars. These seminars have been conducted across the United States, in the UK, Canada, for various groups, including the FBI, the US Senate, ExxonMobil, BP, Frito, PepsiCo, US Air Force, Army, Navy, and Marines, and numerous other universities and companies and federal agencies. Beyond his training business, Carl is an amateur historian. He has a passion for the United States, a passion for the revolution, and he regularly shares his stories with people. His stories and his topic today is Press On, the Story of Long Knife. Please join me in welcoming Carl Flowers.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening.
As a trainer, Tom, don't go away. As a trainer, I have to give notes. So you have to take notes. No, you don't have to take them. I just have to hand them out. So
I can do that.
here are some notes that just,
Sometime.
Tom will take care of that. Just to hand out, I always feel that it helps enhance the presentation if you can kind of follow along. So that's what we're going to do. I actually spoke to your group once. Keep looking up at the wrong. Spoke to your group once in during the COVID years. So it's going to refer to them now as the COVID years, right? But we are just about out of those, we hope. Okay, so some of you then know that I speak regularly about the founding because we're coming up on the 250th anniversary, just 4 years from now. In fact, we've already had the 250th anniversary of the Boston Massacre, and coming up in 23 will be the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party. And it'll go on and on. Some of the audience, at least one or two of you, I see, lived through the bicentennial, the 200th anniversary. Does anyone know what they're calling the 250th? It's called the semi-quincentennial. Say that 3 times, okay? Quin is 5, centennial 500, semi half of 500. In a rare moment of wisdom, the U.S. Congress several years ago formed a committee to celebrate, monitor, and manage all the celebrations, and they decided to call it USA250.org. I think that works, doesn't it? Okay, so I've been telling what I call the untold stories of American independence. Now, I'm a little intimidated being here tonight. I am not a son of a patriot. Both grandparents on both sides came from Poland around 1906 to 1908. Although I'm married to a Texas girl whose family was in Texas since 1856. And her sister tells me, and they're going to apply to the daughters, that their family does trace back, they think. So we're going to have the daughters find that out for us. But I've made it my purpose to talk about the untold stories. Well, each one of you have an untold story, because this one we just heard tonight is an untold story. Who knew? The next door neighbor of Paul Revere, a cousin of Paul Revere. What fascinating stories. Keep telling these stories because they're disappearing from the history books. We all know about Paul Revere, but many people don't know about the gentleman I'm talking about tonight, or Henry Knox, or Nathaniel Greene, or John Glover. Some of you know those because you're more into this. So that's why I'm a little intimidated. I know you know the story sometimes as well as I do. They were ordinary people, right? Fishermen, doctors, lawyers, merchants, coppersmiths, different people. Yet they all took on the greatest nation in the world and beat it. How did that happen? Isn't that amazing? Okay. It wouldn't have happened, or we wouldn't still be here today if it weren't for all of the veterans in the room. So would you like to ask all the veterans, would you please stand up? Let's give you one more round of applause, please. Thank you. Much of America just doesn't realize how you have not only sacrificed personally, but your families and your relatives and everybody. So we appreciate that. I was here on Zoom about a year and a half ago, and told the story of the spirits of success, kind of an overview of the revolution and 5 principles that we can learn from it. In case you didn't get the notes, because I think we were all on Zoom that day, I brought copies of all the quotes I shared that day. So that's an extra handout that you can all take away. And it just has those 5 points listed on it. But we are here today. And today is a special day. Not only is it St. Patrick's Day, not only is it my mother's birthday, she would have been 100 today. She died 9 years ago. But in Boston, they call this the evacuation day, right? So you remember the story of Boston, and we'll just briefly go there, that the British, after on April 19th, the British are surrounded, right? They're right there on the city of Boston, and all around Boston, they're surrounded by the Minutemen, okay? On June 17th, they have the Battle of Bunker Hill, which is right up there, okay? And then on June 19th, down in Philadelphia, Washington is appointed commander of the troops, and he arrives around July 2nd, a full year before the Declaration of Independence was signed. And then he spends 6 months getting the army together and organizing things and straightening things out. But he can't figure out how do we get the British out of Boston. And what they describe as a portly is how he was described, portly bookseller, a young 24-year-old man named Henry Knox, who owned the old London bookstore in Boston. He and his wife had to evacuate Boston when it was covered. But in the days of Paul Revere, in the days of the Minutemen and the Sons of Liberty, he had all the latest newspapers from London at the old London bookstore, and all the British officers would come and buy books from him, and they would talk. And he would repeat what they said to Paul Revere and Dr. Joseph Ward. He flees, and because he's read a lot about the artillery, they make him a colonel in the artillery. And he goes to Washington one day in November and he says, you know, if we could get the heights, we tried to take the heights here, we couldn't, but the British have still not occupied Dorchester Heights. And if we could take those heights and put some cannon up there, and Washington says, we don't have any cannon. And Henry Knox says, yeah, but there's 52 cannon just about 300 miles away over in Fort Ticonderoga, and it's only winter, we can do it. So Washington says, yeah, right. They give him the money, they send him off in December in the middle of the storm. He packs up, he's got 56 ox carts, he brings them 300 miles, they cross the Hudson 3 times. They lost some cannon, dug them out, and got them out of the water, and he gets back to Boston around the 1st of March, okay, with all these cannon, and no one thought they could do that. Okay? And as a result, meanwhile down in Philadelphia, they're having committee meetings and debates and speeches, right? But Henry Knox has this idea. He brings them there. Washington gets to fire the first shot on March 4th, and they hit a British ship, and the British say, where did that come from? Okay. And from Dorchester Heights, and then on March 17th, the British evacuate. So today in Boston, they have a St. Patrick's Day parade, but they still call it Evacuation Day in Boston. That's just today in history. We are here to talk about this gentleman here, Longknife, the Conqueror of the Northwest. If you have lived in or visited Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin, or Michigan, all of that territory came into the colonies, into the brand new United States due to this story that I'm going to tell you right now. A story that most people don't know, one of the epic marches in Army history, and most people don't know. We're certainly not teaching it today. It starts back on February 25th, 1779. It starts in 1779, we're going to go backwards. Fort Sackville, Vincennes. Vincennes is a little town in Indiana, right on the Wabash River between current day Indiana and Illinois. And on February 25th, 1779, a group of ragtag American militia raised the American flag over the British Fort Sackville. They rename it that day Fort Patrick Henry. Okay? And when they do that, when they raise that brand new American flag, all 5 of those states, or that land, comes into the new United States, doubles the size of the United States on that day. How did that happen? How did those states join? It was because of this young 27-year-old militia colonel from Kentucky, actually from Virginia, when he was living in Kentucky. The Native Americans called him Longknife. This is a long knife. I just received this from about 2 weeks ago from a friend of mine who collects memorabilia. He says it's from the early 1800s. Maybe somebody here can verify that. I don't know. But the reason the Native Americans called him Longknife is because the Americans, the frontiersmen, carried knives longer than the Indians. So they called him Longknife, okay, the scalping knife. The Americans called him the Conqueror of the Northwest. That's what he was known as. And there's a huge statue of him as the Conqueror of the Northwest, I think at the University of Virginia. Many of his detractors called him a drunkard because he lived quite a few years after the Revolution and he fell on some hard times. His mother called him George Rogers Cook. And that's his story. So starts in Albemarle, Virginia, where he was born in 1752. Albemarle, Virginia is a very famous county now that a number of people you know of came from. Thomas Jefferson, for one, is from Albemarle County. He is the second of 10 children. There are 6 boys, and he is the second oldest. Okay, 5 of the 6 serve in the Revolutionary War. Because he's the second son, he gets nothing. right? In those days, the oldest son gets the farm, all the rest have to figure it out for themselves. So George Rogers Clark, as a young man, the neighbor of Thomas Jefferson, went to school with James Madison. They were classmates, okay? By the way, the family farm, their lawyer was a man named Patrick Henry. George Rogers Clark says, well, there's nothing here for me in Virginia. I've heard about this place over the mountains, over the Cumberland Gap called Kentucky or Kaintuck. So I think I'll go there. He becomes a surveyor. By the way, his younger brother is William Clark, of Lewis and Clark. So if the Clark name is familiar, that's why. When Jefferson sends Meriwether Lewis and William Clark out, George Rogers Clark was too old to go already because he was in his 40s. Imagine that. So because he's got no prospects in Virginia, he goes to Kentucky and he becomes a surveyor, much like another famous Virginian, George Washington. So a young man was a surveyor. George Rogers Clark goes to Fort Pitt. And then in those days, there were two ways to get into Kentucky here. It was called Kaintuck. And north of Kentucky is Ohio and what they call the Illinois country, mostly populated by Shawnee and a number of other tribes. South of Kentucky was now Tennessee, but of course it was part of North Carolina then, populated mostly by Cherokee and several other tribes. And the Native Americans had gotten together and said, Kentucky is such a nice place. Let's nobody live there. Let's make it hunting. So from both sides, we'll go hunt, but we won't we won't harvest, we won't do anything there. We will go back to our respective areas. Well, now all of a sudden in the 1770s, these pesky white men start coming over the mountains, okay? And there were two ways to get there. One was down the Ohio River, which kind of runs along that borderline. And the other way, pioneered by Daniel Boone, was through the Cumberland Gap. And so in 1770, there's probably less than 1,000 white settlers in Kentucky. But by 1774, 75, there's several thousand. And now they start coming about 1,000 a year. And the population is building. Kentucky is considered part of Virginia at the time because the colonies claimed everything to the Mississippi. That was their charter. You could have everything to that river. So there were three major forts in Kentucky at the time. There was Boonesboro, Harrodsburg, and Logan's Fort, named after three different people, Boone, James Harrod, and I forget what Logan's name is. Because what happened was, and there's Daniel Boone. I asked a historian at Locust Grove, which I'll tell you about in a little bit, a historian well-known, writes a lot about George Rogers Clark. I said, how come Daniel Boone is more well-known than George Rogers Clark? And she told me he had a better publicist. So why is Paul Revere so well-known? Well, because Nathaniel Longfellow wrote the poem, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. So somebody wrote a story about Daniel Boone, no one wrote a story about George Rogers Clark. The British up in Detroit, all of this area up here, remember that the French Indian War, which ended in 1756, was fought over the colonies, basically. And the French had been settling from Canada, had been settling Illinois and Indiana country. Remember Joliet and Marquette, those are all French settlements there. So when the British seize Canada, they get all that land. And so up here in Detroit, Henry Hamilton, a lieutenant governor, who is called Hamilton the Hair Buyer, that's what he's known as, he starts sending Native Americans into Kentucky to attack the settlements. So they have to gather around the three forts. And although they had property farther out, they pretty much always lived in the forts. When the Indians attack, that's where they all gather to fight them off. George Rogers Clark becomes a captain in the militia, like Daniel Boone, and he's involved in fighting and protecting the settlements, and becomes very well known as a frontiersman. And you know, did the normal things that they all did there. He had been surveying, he bought a little land, he would go back to Virginia for Christmas every year, but he'd come back into Kentucky. Well, now the Declaration of Independence is signed. So the Northwest Territories, where Virginia and Pennsylvania claimed all this land. They both had a claim on it. If there's Pennsylvania, there's Virginia. And you see Kentucky as part of Virginia. In the future states that we mentioned already. So what happens is, as a result of these raids, George Rogers Clark goes back in December of 1776. And this Declaration of Independence is signed, they're having the first meeting of the new state of Virginia and their Congress. And the colonists in Kentucky sent George Rogers Clark and another person back to represent them. They get there too late. The meeting is already over. But George Rogers Clark goes and talks to the legislature and he says, look, you got all these people, you got 4,000 or 5,000 people now in Kentucky, you got to protect them. So because there's the British occupied, he has sent some spies, and the spies tell him there are 3 forts in Indiana and along the Mississippi. Cahokia, Kaskaskia, and Vincennes are the towns. So he goes back to the legislature and he says, you got to help us because the British are sending people and the Native Americans are attacking us. So give us something. The legislature loans him 500 pounds of gunpowder. It's a loan. You have to pay for it. By the way, you have to get it to Kentucky by yourself. Now, one of the things you learn about George Rogers Clark is, although he didn't study psychology, nobody did in those days, he really understood psychology. And what he says is he didn't like that. So he says to the legislature, if a country is not worth defending, it's not worth claiming. He said, you can't claim this if you're not going to help defend it. In fact, if you don't give us the gunpowder and help me get it to Kentucky, I'm going to go someplace else like Pennsylvania. And if they don't help me, I'm going to go to the British. Okay, because we've got good people here that are in trouble. Okay, so the legislature backs down and they give him the gunpowder and they arrange to ship it. He brings it back in 1777. In the fall of so he starts defending and they're having their normal battles there in Kentucky. In the fall of 1777, he goes back to the legislature, meets with Patrick Henry in Williamsburg. That's was the original building there. Patrick Henry, his neighbor, the lawyer, his friend, and Henry promotes him to lieutenant colonel. So he is now in charge of all the militia in Kentucky. Daniel Boone reports to him. He also says, George Rogers Clark has this idea. He says, see those 3 forts there, if I had 500 guys, I could go take those forts. In fact, if I had 500 men, I could go take Detroit. So Henry says, okay, that's a good idea. I'm going to give you permission to raise 7 companies of 50 men each here in Virginia. And I'll give you 350. George Rogers Clark figures he can get another 150 from the frontier. He gets 2 sets of orders. They don't tell the legislature what they're doing. They don't tell them about Detroit. They just say, we're going to go protect the frontier. We're going to raise these companies, protect the frontier. So it was march against and attack our Western enemies was what the legislature knew. But Governor Patrick Henry wrote to him, your operations should not be confined to the fort settlement mentioned in your secret orders, but then you can proceed to do those other things we talked about. So he's got 2 sets of orders. No one knows what he's really going to do. But he wants Detroit. He wants to end the British domination in the Northwest Territories. So he begins raising people. And on May 5th in 1778, he's in Pittsburgh at the start. It's called Fort Pitt. It's the start of the Ohio River. But unfortunately, he only gets 150 men instead of 350. Couldn't raise any more men in Virginia. Why? They were fighting. They were either farming or they were fighting. And so he couldn't get any men from there. So he says, all right, I'll do it with 150 because I'm going to get another 150 from Kentucky, from the settlements. Okay? So they float down the river on flatboats. And when they get to just north of the Kentucky River comes in right here, just north of Lexington, currently where my daughter happens to live. And that's where he's supposed to meet the 150. 24 show up. So now he has 174 men. Okay. Most people would say, forget it, we can't do it. Not George Rogers Clark. He says, I knew our case was desperate, but the more I reflected on my weakness, the more pleased I was with the enterprise. He said, we can do this. We can do it at 175. They don't know we're coming. They don't know how many people we have. We'll do this. So he floats down farther to the falls of the Ohio, right here, which is the site of current day Louisville. And he builds a fort there. And the fort is called Corn Island. There's a little island. It's not doesn't exist anymore, but it's right out in the river, just opposite. It almost sounds like my daughter's ring, but it's not. Okay, Corn Island. So Louisville would be right here. There's Corn Island. He builds a fort on Corn Island, and he starts training his men. He still hasn't told them what they're doing. They believe they're protecting the frontier. It's the current site. Louisville, George Rogers Park is considered the founder of Louisville, Kentucky. This is the statue that's on the Ohio River today on Belvedere Plaza that faces Indiana across the river. So the Illinois country now has got these 3 forts. He's here. There's a fort here, there's a fort here, and there's a fort there. Cahokia, Kaskaskia, and Vincennes. And he starts out on June 24th is the day they leave. There's an eclipse that day. Everybody gets scared. George Rogers Park spins it and he says, it's a good sign. It means they don't know we're coming, okay? He told everybody what they're doing before he left. And about 20 guys said, nah, that's not for us. So he said, fine, you stay here and protect the frontier. The rest of us are going downriver, okay? They sailed downriver to a place called, it's right across from Metropolis, Illinois today. George Rogers Park's spies told him that the British were watching the Mississippi and Ohio and they would see him coming. So they get off here and they march across about 120 miles. As they're marching across, they run into some French hunters from Kaskaskia who offered to guide him. Rogers Park doesn't trust them because the French were aligned, the French militia was working for the British because the British had the forts. But he lets them guide them. And when he gets to Kaskaskia, he surrounds the town, waves a lot of flags, shoots out some guns, but they don't see how many people he has. And they capitulate. They just say, okay, we give up, okay? And so he takes the people in town and he puts the men in one building and he separates the women and children. Now the British had been telling the local settlers that the Americans were cannibals, that they were going to take your wives and children. They're terrible people. They're worse than the Native Americans. So after a day or two of separation, a Jesuit priest named Father Gibault comes out and says to George Rogers Park, look, we really don't like the British. And if you just let us see our wives, let the men see their wives again, we'll help you and we'll cooperate with you. And George Rogers Park says, well, do you think they'd fight for us? And they said, you know, we really would like to get rid of the British. George Rogers Park says, well, I just happen to have this piece of paper here that I got in Virginia that says the French are now on our side, and showed him a copy of the new treaty because the French had signed the treaty in 1778 after the Battle of Saratoga. So they are now, the French militia sides with him. Father Gibault, in fact, goes to Vincennes and convinces the people at Fort Sackville to the townspeople to support George Rogers Park. So he captures Kaskaskia without a shot. His friend de Bowen, one of his captains, goes and captures Cahokia across St. Louis, and Helms takes Vincennes. And Clark sets up camp kind of in Kaskaskia, and he goes up to Cahokia in the fall of 1778. Goes up to Cahokia, and he starts meeting with the native tribes. And today at Springfield, Illinois, there is this is part of a mural that hangs in the Illinois State Capitol. It's 20 feet tall. And it's a picture of George Rogers Clark meeting with the native tribes. For 5 weeks, different chieftains keep coming in to see him. And every time he does the same thing, he demonstrates his power. They've all heard about Long Knife. They're all afraid of him. And then he says to them, and he had 2 belts. He had what they're called wampum belts. One was red, one was white. And he said, I hold in my hand 2 belts, the red belt of war and the white belt of peace. What I want you to do is go home, and tomorrow I'll come back and tell me which belt you want. And if you choose the red belt of war, that's okay. But you better just be prepared to die when you come back. They all came back and all of them chose the white belt. So he pacifies the whole frontier. And that's why he's honored in Illinois today for that, when he meets with them. Now, in fact, one of the native chieftains said, the big knife did not speak like any other people that we have ever heard. Everybody else just gave us gifts and let us do what we want. This guy stood up to us. And George Rogers Clark in his diary writes, I gave harsh language to supply the wanted men, well knowing that it was a mistaken notion in many that soft speeches were best. Does history repeat itself? You be the judge. So he pacifies the frontier, but Henry Hamilton up in Detroit in December puts 600 men together, mostly Native Americans, about 100 British soldiers. He sails down the Wabash River from Detroit down to Vincennes and recaptures Fort Vincennes. And then he makes a classic mistake. He retakes Fort Vincennes He rebuilds the fort, makes it a better, stronger fort, but then it's the middle of winter, and in those days, nobody fights in the winter. So he makes a classic mistake of saying to most of his troops and all the Native Americans, you can go back to your lodges back in Detroit because nothing's going to happen here till the spring. So come back in March and April. Okay? And so he leaves he stays with a small amount of men. On February 5th, George Rogers Clark writes to Patrick Henry. He says, I know that if they come back in the spring with 600 men, I can't defend. I've got about 175 people. That's all I got. So he says the case is desperate. I either have to leave, quit the country, get back all the forts, or attack. And guess what? Great things have been affected by a few men well conducted. We're going to attack. So he leaves Cahokia here on February 5th. He sends a gunboat up the rivers, but it never makes it in time. So he's got 170 men walking across southern Illinois, about 180 miles, mostly frozen or wet, flooded grounds. Okay, so they're marching in their knees, marching in their waists up the water, carrying a rifle and 30 or 40 pounds of ammunition and supplies over their heads to keep it dry. And what George Rogers Clark does is he sends his captains up ahead to find dry land. So they are always about a half a mile ahead. They find a little mound of dry land. They say, come on, everybody, come on. Let's go a little farther. Then when they get there, they go again. And then they go again. When they come to a river, they can't tell where the river is because you're walking along and all of a sudden it's real deep because you're walking over flooded lands. So he makes some boats. They get them across the boats. This goes on for 3 weeks, like this. And there's very little food. They're running out of food. There's no hunting because the animals are all gone. There's a funny story about the drummer boy who had to float on his drum because the water was over his head. Okay? They finally arrive at Fort Sackville. Now, what you see in the background here is that's Illinois. This is Indiana. That's the Wabash River. The fort was built on the river. The town is here. George Rogers Clark circles around, comes up this way, and conceals his troops behind the hills that make up the town. And he gets the townspeople, and they're all on his side. So then they announce that they walk back and forth with flags. He's doing a lot of obfuscation, I guess you'd call it. And the British try to fire a cannon. They destroy one of the homes. George Rogers Clark, the Americans always fought with long rifles, which are bored, as you know, and very accurate, whereas the British had muskets. So after they destroyed one house, every time somebody poked their head out to fire a cannon, they would shoot them in the head. And they were very effective at keeping everybody into that fort. For about 2 days now, he sends messages in, you're going to surrender. They don't really know how many people he has. Then what happens is some raiding Indians are coming back from Kentucky. And there's 3 chieftains that are well known in Kentucky as leading some of these raids. So some of his men knew who these guys were. And they saw George Rogers Clark people. They thought they were British. They didn't know about the attack. So they come right up to him. Rogers Clark captures them. He puts them on trial for all the atrocities they've committed in Kentucky. And he has one of his people take them out onto the parade ground in full view of the fort. And they tomahawk them right out there. When the British see that, they believe, uh-oh, this is what's going to happen to us. So he sends in another demand. They decide to surrender. Okay, so the British come out and surrender. Still don't know how many people he has. They accept the surrender. They march out. They parole some of the guys. The officers are taken back to Virginia, and then they raise the flag. In fact, Henry Hamilton didn't even put the British flag up that morning because he didn't want to lower it for the Americans. And so that's really the story of how this all happened. Okay? George Rogers Clark becomes a big hero. Doubles the size of the new United States, doubles the size. Unfortunately for George Rogers Clark, there were no fax machines, there was no internet, and there were no Xerox copiers. So when he had expenses, he spent his own money and he sent the receipts back to Virginia, and many of them got lost because you're traveling through the wilderness. So for years go by and he's trying to get his money and he doesn't get it. The federal government does give him a lot of land right here in southern Indiana, across from Louisville, what's called Clark County, and some of his men get the land. But he used his own money to pay people. So the historians today would say the problem with George Rogers Clark is he outlived his legacy. After he did this, he was involved in 2 or 3 other attempts. He never took Detroit. They put 2 or 3 expeditions together. He was involved in some of the Shawnee Wars in Ohio, but they never made it to Detroit. That didn't work. He was involved in those Indian campaigns. He retired from the military as a brigadier general in 1790, but still poor, and tried to start a canal company around the rapids in Louisville. That failed. Later on, somebody did the same thing and succeeded. It just wasn't time for him. He almost gets involved in that little fiasco of Aaron Burr's down in New Orleans, but he decides not to do that. He builds a cabin across the river. It's there today. You can go see it. And people come visiting him. All the chieftains come visiting him. Lewis and Clark visit him on the way west and on the way back. Unfortunately, he does drink a little bit, okay? And he was sick. He wasn't feeling well. He fell one day in his cabin into the fireplace and injured his leg so bad that they had to amputate his leg. He has a stroke, in fact, 1809, and then they amputate his leg. So he moves back across the river. His little sister, Lucy, marries William Cron, a general in the Revolution who served with one of Clark's brothers with Washington in the Southern campaign. And William Cron becomes one of the most successful and richest men in Kentucky. And he builds this mansion in Louisville called Locust Grove. And so George Rogers Clark goes to live there with his little sister after his stroke, and he dies 9 years later, and he's buried there today. While he's there, 2 presidents visit him. 2 former presidents come by and visit him, or future presidents. So you can learn, there's a great museum there about George Rogers Clark in Louisville. So what can we learn? How can we apply this to our business? How can we apply this to our life? I'll give you 4 principles here. Be focused. George Rogers Clark knew what he wanted. He wanted Detroit. He never got it, but he got those other towns. He was focused on that, and he kept his focus to himself and told people when they needed to know. He was also very bold. He bluffed people. He bluffed the Virginia legislature. He bluffed Henry Hamilton. He stuck his neck out over and over again and took risks. And because of those risks, we are where we are today. He was also fair. He scared people up front, but he was very kind and fair to the native tribes once he settled with them. He was kind and fair to the people in Kaskaskia. He did everything he could to help people once he had them on his side. Okay? Most importantly, he was persistent. He never quit. He kept fighting until the very end, until he got what he needed. He didn't actually say press on regardless, only because he didn't think about it. He would have said it. All right. What's his legacy? Just some things you might want to know. In Illinois, I told you about the mural on the Capitol building. So if you're ever in the state capitol of Springfield, and then you want to go see the Lincoln Museum, also the old state capitol. In Cahokia, there's another statue of him looking over the river. Clark Street in Chicago, right next to State Street, named after George Rogers Clark. In Indiana, there's Clark County right across from Louisville and Clarksville. And there's a Victory Square in Indianapolis with 4 major statues in a circle, and George Rogers Clark was one of the statues there. Probably his greatest legacy, or the thing you want to visit, is in Vincennes, Indiana, the National Historic Site of George Rogers Clark, the largest memorial outside of Washington, D.C. to any hero. And kind of patterned after the Jefferson Memorial. And inside there, it was dedicated by Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. Inside there are 6 murals that tell about his campaigns and the things we're talking about. If you want to read more about George Rogers Clark, there's a great book here called Long Life. It's written by James Alexander Thom, who wrote a number of books about Tecumseh, about Lewis and Clark, about Sacagawea, about the woman captured in Kentucky, in Pennsylvania, and followed the river back. They made a movie of it, Follow the River, about 10, 12 years ago. So this is, but it's what's called historic fiction. It's accurate in the history, but it explains things from a narrative style. So sometimes they create words for the characters. I brought a copy of this book, and Tom, I'll just give it to the club. Yep. And you can do whatever you want with it for the club. There's also George Rogers Clark's own memoirs, which are called the Memoirs of George Rogers Clark, or the Conquest of Illinois, where he tells the stories himself. There's a great one, I Glory in War, George Rogers Clark by William Nestor. And then the woman I told you about, Gwen Potts, is the former executive director of Locust Grove, and I've heard her give a couple presentations there. She wrote a really great book about George Rogers Clark and Locust Grove, so about that. And then also George Rogers Clark and William Cron, and how the two of them worked together and how their families worked together. So that is the story of Long Knife. Any questions?
How long would it take you to put this together?
You know, I first read Long Knife about 10 or 12 years ago, so it's hard for me to say that because I kind of work on gigs a little bit at a time. Good, thank you. But I'm writing a book. This is chapter 7. So it's going to include Henry Knox, going to include Joseph Warren, going to include Nathaniel Greene, John Glover, who saved the Marblehead fishermen, saved Washington's army 3 times in a 6-month period. So a lot of great stories that we're just not telling today, unfortunately.
Carl, do you know where our headquarters is?
I've driven by it. I've not been there. I used to be in Washington all the time, but then COVID.
This is Washington.
Oh, yours is in Louisville? Oh, no, I thought I was thinking, I thought it was Washington.
Street from the Louisville Slugger Museum.
I did not know that.
That is our national headquarters. Been there for, and we, you should visit.
Well, I'm going next week.
Our library and our,
Yeah.
it's on, the main street is about, hey, well, you know where, everybody knows where Louisville Slugger
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, there's a museum downtown Louisville, and I walked into it. That's where I found out about Locust Grove. I was in that museum, and I said, "You got any exhibits at George Rogers Park?" And they said, "Who?" They said, "Oh yeah, there's something up here." I said, "But the place you really want to go is Locust Grove."
Just tell them Nathan White.
Nathan White, yeah. Okay, but no, I'm going there next week because I'm speaking in Southern Illinois. I'm driving over to Lexington to see my daughter. So. I do have, I started on Facebook. I post things almost every day. That's probably the best way to track me. I do have a YouTube channel, but we started it right before COVID and it kind of fell apart. But I'm going to redo it and do something. We'll do short little vignettes using Zoom technology. And I'm looking for people, like it's kind of like a video podcast. And I'd really like to interview somebody and tell your stories. So if you're interested in that, give me your card or let Tom know. Tom and I are stay in touch. So because I would love to tell some of your stories. Just interview you and ask a couple questions. It'd be fun. Thank you. These are the quotes from the very first talk that I gave. Pass those around.
Carl, thank you so much. We have a certificate for you, and from our group here, McKinney, we get a picture.
Oh, I'll take it. Sorry. Get it? Not yet, no. Okay. Okay. All right. And then you.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I promised my friend that I get a picture with.
Yeah.
This, so.
Here, I can get that one. I'll get that. How do you want this? You want?
Just something with Long Knife, that's all. I just told him I was gonna.
Okay.
Scare people
Hey,
with this knife.
we can get somebody to look scared if we need.
I can tag the audience.
Okay, so let's see here. Let's get this up.
It turns sideways. There you go.
Yeah, so they see.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot better, yeah. You don't look mean enough. Y'all get your smile, now give me a beat. And you look, there you go. I'll send all those to you.
Thank you very much.
Hey,
Thanks for all you do for keeping history alive.
Okay. Place I need to go there. That's pretty interesting. How many people have heard about Rogers Park before? Oh. Did you see that? What, 40% of us maybe? 50? Wow, that's cool.
Doesn't look like we're gonna be traveling to Europe much in the near future, so
Yeah,
go see some of the sites in America.
that's right. Plenty of things we can see around here, right?
Good, thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on now to our old business and announcements. Our next meeting is going to be right here, April 21st, in person and by Zoom, via Zoom. I've actually now, they weren't letting me schedule very many months in a row, but I'm actually Now I have gotten them to let me schedule the rest of the year here with the exception of December where we have a Christmas party. So that's a good thing. So they seem to feel comfortable enough about it, the way things are going, that they let me schedule all that. So we're going to meet here third Thursday of every month. So put it on your calendars. Our state convention is in Richardson, starts on the 31st of March and goes through April 2nd. Registration fee is $40. It's right down here at Hilton in Richardson, so it's not that far away. I would encourage, any of you, really all of you, that want to understand, know more about the organization, how it functions, giving some more insight to it. I think we're going to have several training classes, like on the Thursday. One of them is like how to clean gravestones, and the other one was on, we have a color guard. And by the way, I heard a rumor about you, Bob. I heard a rumor that you were the deputy adjutant for the color guard.
Oh, yeah, I got promoted.
So this is Bob Milwee. Bob is not, and he comes and scrubs a lot because the surgeries don't get over with in time, right, Bob?
I'm on call.
On call, so he's got to look like, okay. But anyway, so Bob, from the time he came into the group and got the paperwork filled out and everything, he was wanting to be in the color guard, okay? So, and he comes to all of the color guard events that he can do consistent with his work schedules, okay? And so when I was asked who I thought should maybe be considered for that position, well, I said, well, Bob ought to be considered. And so congratulations. Would everybody give him a hand? He is now. Keep it up. And now we can just get over 3 people in this chapter in the color guard. There's only 3 of us right now. So some of you guys must want to get in the color guard. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Don't forget, you get to shoot black powder rifles.
Whoa.
So it's a lot. And I think we're going to have a training session here before too long. So, have you gotten your rifle yet?
No.
It's still hung up on a ship somewhere? Oh, okay. Okay, anyway, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see here. But again, please consider going down there. Like I said, it's not that far. You can sort of see how the organization functions, issues involved. You'll meet people, there'll people be coming. They don't, it represents the whole state, but some of the chapters that are far away from here, like, Paso and other places, don't always make it, do they, Nathan? But maybe they will, right? Nathan? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we got 2 from El Paso. Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Okay, so anyway, so you can meet some more of the compatriots around the state of Texas and get to know people better. It's a worthwhile thing to do. Okay, so let's move on to new business. The minutes for the last meeting are on the website. And so do I hear a motion to pass those meetings as written? Okay, got Tom. I got Tom in Salt Boston, reach out, David, but I'll let you have a second. How's that? Okay, I'll give it to Pete. Pete's gonna second it.
Peter McClellan.
Peter, is that an Irish name?
Oh, McClellan.
Oh, McClellan, okay, I got it.
today.
Just for today. You should have a badge that you could wear just on special occasions that says Peter McClellan. Okay, so anyway, do I have, okay, we've had a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? No discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, we accept the minutes as written. Okay, treasurer's report. Ralph Thompson's online. Hey, Ralph, how you feeling? He's got his stomach. Okay, Ralph's still trying to recover from COVID, so he's struggling a little bit. But give me a second here, and I'm gonna read his treasurer's report for you. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, here's the treasurer's report dated March 17th, 2022. The balances of February's report was $4,555.85. We received 1 dual member membership dues for $20, an ACH deposits from Amazon That's the Amazon Smiles thing that you can sign up for, by the way, to have some small fraction of your purchases basically support nonprofits, and that's what that is. I recommend if you're not doing one of those and you do Amazon Prime, sign up for our chapter. If you need some more information, either myself or Ralph can help you with that. Anyway, so that was $16.78. Benevity causes, we got $485.50. This was a total surprise to us. I've written a note to the person who gave it to us. He's up in, can't remember whether he was in Minnesota or somewhere, and thanked him profusely for the money. He has not come back and said it was a mistake, so I'm claiming it's ours. So unless he's got about 10 more days, and then it's ours. Anyway, so we're excited to get that money. Okay, we incurred an expense of $50 for the reimbursement of expenses for certificate. That was me. We were running low on the certificates that we print out and use, and so I bought a batch of certificates from National. The current balance, let's see, the current balance in the bank is $5,178.13 with uncleared checks totaling $150. So the current check register balance is $5,028.13. Okay, so do I hear a motion to accept this? Okay, that's Pete O. McClellan. Who seconded?
Joe.
Joe, okay, Joe Chenwood, okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes. Thank you. Let's see, other business from the floor. Let's see.
Everybody needs to sign in. They haven't signed in already,
Yes.
and we haven't had introduction.
So we're gonna do introductions at the end then. That sounds good. So, okay, so you already met Carl. And thank you again, Carl. Those are really good. I think I've heard you at least 3, if not 4.
You came back anyway.
I keep coming back. Good guy. So anyway, so that's good. And Pete O here.
Pete McClellan from McKinney.
Okay.
Gary Jones of McKinney.
Okay.
Matt Hoover, McKinney. City Metro, Melissa.
Okay.
Ed Hoover.
From here, wherever, okay. You want to go ahead, Joe? Yeah. No, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Maria Ford, McKinney.
John Ray, Plano, chapter.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you, my wife Wanda from McKinney.
David Nolan, McKinney.
Yeah.
Tom Van Fossen, McKinney and Dallas.
Mark McCraw, McKinney.
Jerry Kenny, Plano chapter. Joe Sherman, Allen.
Peter Ford, McKinney.
Okay. Plus,
Bloss Ruby, McKinney.
Bob Miller, McKinney.
I'm Andy Wilson. I'm Tom's favorite nephew.
and his paperwork is in.
I found someone I could get Tom to.
Yeah, that's right.
Rich Bonaparte, my wife Lynn.
Yeah.
Gary Barnett, this time. Jim Akers, and
Okay.
Who's back in the beginning, the first wife.
That was great. Have we got everyone? Oh, who do we miss?
David.
David.
Yes.
Get out like a wall.
And online, we had Lacey, Ralph Thompson was here, and then Tom Whitelock also was here. They left, but Al's still online.
So Dave is a very important man. He controls the money for the state of Texas, the Texas Society. How's the money looking? We got money?
We were doing great till November.
What happened in November? Bottom fell out?
I'll let you figure that out.
I'll think on that a while. Okay, I'll think on that one. Okay, so let's see here. Tom Van Fossen, District 11.
6.
11's not here, 10's not here. Okay. Anything from the state or otherwise that you'd like to mention?
I would say from District 6, it's nice to see Plano. This is peaceful training, but it's just nice to, I'm a full member here, but it's just nice to see everybody.
and to see where all the chapters in North Texas are attending each other's meeting.
Appreciate all you guys. Let's see here. David, did you have anything else to say relative to the
Well,
state?
you said state meeting, so that's great.
Yeah.
Don't get it. So,
So the rest of the story is that this chapter is the sponsor for a Board of Managers meeting that's going to occur here in late October. Okay, and so David and I have been working to try to get a hotel tied down and various other things going relative to that. At some point in time, we're going to need some help. It'll be here in the area, so we're not going to have to go very far to do it. But it'll be a good opportunity, again, to see, the state organization in action and all the things that go on there. So that's just a warning. We're going to need some help. So, and David.
they can start working on the raffle. We need that.
Oh, yeah. So we need some shining on David for some reason.
October 22nd, we're shooting for what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, we're gonna have a raffle there. So we're looking for some interesting things that can be raffled off, okay? Things like if you're in good with the Dallas Cowboys organization, some tickets to one of the games would be acceptable, something along those lines, down to, some sort of a special item that people that are like-minded like we are would be interested in bidding on. So if you could start thinking about that and maybe coming up with some ideas. Let's see, I think at the one that we're having here in March, 1st of April, they've got a rifle, right? A reproduction rifle.
Correct.
Black powder rifle that's fireable, I'm assuming, and the whole thing.
It is not fireable at this time.
At
It
this,
is exact replica of the brown vest, except the vent hole from the firebox to the barrel has not been drilled out yet.
But it can be ready.
I think that was going to be my question.
Yeah.
What size bit do you need?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, okay. So that's just the way it came, right?
That's the way it came. It came out of Canada, and it was just too many regulations that someone's finding out about shipping a rifle.
From somewhere else.
Then it became a non-working thing, so there was no regulation.
Okay. All right, but anyway, that's
It's
one.
under my bed. It's a real nice.
So anyway, so you're raffling that off. That would be probably, is that going to be like on Saturday?
Yes, that'll be
Saturday of the meeting? Okay, so you come down there and bid on that.
Yeah, it'll be during the fact that that's not.
Okay. Anything else we need to talk about on the?
I think that's it for us.
Okay. Any other business from the floor? It's quiet. Oh, what? Oh, we're good. Ray, could you tell us about what you have been working on and found? We're gonna need some help on this too, guys. Your the Patriot you found. Here, let me, I'll come back.
Ted Wilson asked me to.
Here, let me give you this so the guys will.
Ted Wilson had asked me to help him with the Patriot grain locations in the state. And right off the bat, I discovered a Patriot buried in Bonham, Texas. That, well, I guess he's just, he's in the list, but he's just off. So I have discovered his grave. It's in a small family cemetery called the Russell Family Cemetery. If you're familiar with Bonham, it's on the east side, over close to the golf course, in a housing area. And so we've been working a little bit with a plan. Number one, we're trying to locate some of the living members of the Russell family. Now, I said his name was James Carter. He came to Texas, to Bonham, in 1839 with his daughter and his son-in-law, was named Russell. They received over 500 acres donation. That's the reason families came to Texas, back in those days is for free land. And so, he died in 1850. He is buried in that small cemetery. It's a total wreck right now. It's not been taken care of. It's under some large trees that limbs have fallen off and crushed gravestones. His is in 3 pieces right now. TL has been out and got it, we've leveled it, cleaned it some, it needs more cleaning, but then it's got to be repaired and the 3 pieces put back together. So in the near future, we don't have any plans for updates here. We're going to honor this patron by marking his grave. And of course, we're hoping that McKinney chapter will give us a hand here. And because we're close together and we work together. So
Have you got that scheduled?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a date in mind when you're gonna?
We're thinking September, but maybe October, because it's going to be hot in September. And some of these uniforms don't fare well in September, but I'm working now trying to get permission from the Bonham Police Department to fire muskets. So far, I've not received that permission, but I think it'll come.
Is the DAR up there interested in helping?
I'm sorry, sir, I can't hear you.
Is the DAR chapter in your area?
Yes,
Willing to help?
yes, so Martha Jefferson Randolph is in our area, and they will be included. And hopefully we can get them to honor it too also at the same time.
There's a Sherman SAR camp as well. May, I don't know.
Okay, we can use all the help. We're gonna try to plan it on a day that the state officers may not be doing something, and we can hopefully get them up along with the Fannin County and the Bonham City officials. Just, have a big party up there.
Right.
So this guy is in our database. But no one has applied for membership through it. We don't know a lot about it, only what we've got in our records back in Nashville. So,
Right. Okay, thank you.
any other questions?
Is he in Rick Bell's book?
Yes, sir, he is. Matter of fact, that's one of the items in online in the book. And he's in the Texas record.
Right.
But in that record, it doesn't show him as a patron. I'll be honest with you, we worked on this, I have quite a bit. He was born in 1759. Now think about the age. He was 6 years old when the war started. But I have found records, and along with Bill, we worked on this, where he was a guard in Halifax, North Carolina, which matches our records in Nashville. So
Prison guard, right? Prison guard, right?
I really wish we had someone that applied for it, but we never worked.
Well, I'd like to thank you for what you're doing, because I know you've done a lot of work already to try to find him. And the fact that there's one here close to us that hasn't been marked, we need to take care of that. And again, we've got to do a lot of, we've got to get it cleaned up. What I've heard about it, Ray, is that, you know, there's houses all around it, right? And you have to, and so to get to it, you have to go across other people's property. And basically, it's just, there's a lot of basically crumbles that are all the other gravestones around it, but his survived. So it's, you know, it's not in the greatest of shape, but we should make it in a very presentable shape before we get through with it. So that, at least that's my view on it.
One other word about that. There is an easement.
Okay, there is, good.
That goes up to the cemetery. But there's a cattle guard off of the street, the city street, into the easement. The lady informed me, don't cross that cattle guard and fall in with it. We've examined it, it's been in perfect condition.
Okay.
Or not perfect, let me rephrase that, but it's got railroad, not cross ties, but railroad rails.
Oh, really?
So it's in pretty good shape.
Okay.
So we've let UTL go across this week.
Oh, somebody got up the nerve to go across it. They sort of held up with the truck or something? Okay, good.
We hope we won't walk across.
Okay, great. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Like I said, as they organize it, they have the lead on it, but I've already committed that we'll help and, do what we need to do to sort of help. And if we need to contribute a little bit to freshen the place up or put a little fence around something, or whatever y'all decide to do, I think we can, I think we'll be able to support that. So anyway, so that's that. Okay, any other business? Okay. If you would stand with me for the benediction. May the blessings of God Almighty rest upon us in our works done in His name. May He give us life to guide us, courage to support us, and love to unite us now and forevermore. Amen. With that, would you join me in the sessional in your program? Until we meet again, let us remember our obligations to our forefathers who gave us our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, an independent Supreme Court, and a nation of free men. Okay, thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.